All right, everybody, thank you for waiting, and thank you for coming. My name is Ron Chinzer. I'm with this. I'm a police officer. I am not a Bollywood model, contrary to your belief. First off, thank you guys for coming, man. I know everybody's tired. I'm exhausted, not just because it is a weekday. What is it today, Thursday? It's been a long couple weeks. Excuse me. I'm a little under the weather, but this is so important to us. This is our 14th or 15th gang prevention, 14th gang prevention town hall. And you know, some of the numbers we've had are similar today, and some of them we've had 70 people plus. Some of them have been extremely intense. Some of them have been very open to new ideas and sharing their experiences. But regardless, in all of them, we've always come back and taken a lot of stuff that helps us kind of get better at what we're doing and really the purpose of this. So, Integrated Gang Prevention Task Force, obviously, is part of the Toronto Police. I work for the Toronto Police. Jason is my boss. He works for the Toronto Police. Preston is there with us as well. And we have a couple students from the University of Guelph Humber. Over the last 3 years, the University of Guelph Humber has given us 2 of their top students every year to come out and help us out. So they help us out with stuff like this, some academic components, some data entry. Unfortunately, these 3 in the back, I don't know how they managed to slip in, but they did. I think that you Guelph felt sorry for them. But again, thank you for coming. Kind of the purpose of today, and I'll give you the highlights of how it's going to end up going, and always how it's always gone, is we'll spend 20 to 40 minutes kind of just going over the high overview, kind of what we know, where we started, why we're here, why we're doing this, and then we shut off the camera and the microphone, we shut it all down, and we just have an open, honest discussion where we share lots of different things. And the things that we share, I'll give you some of the insights. When we get there, about some of the stuff we've learned that's extremely valuable for us, and not only identifying what type of issues there are in communities and neighborhoods, but really places we can all get better. And we can all, that's a big term, but I'll explain to you who we all are. When this started, again, it was about 3 years ago. Our deputy chief, who was one of the big guys up top, came down to the Gun and Gang Task Force where Jay and I work, and he said, listen, every year we go out, the last 15 years we've been arresting major gangs every year. I mean, you guys will know about this, and girls, where every year you hear Toronto Police with 15 other police agencies did 150 search warrants, and you know, we kick in all these doors and we arrest hundreds of people, we lay thousands of charges and get guns. Well, every year since 2006 or 2005, those numbers have never decreased. In fact, they've increased. So that's indicative of a few things. All right, 1, what we're doing works because we're getting the numbers and numbers are increasing. But 2, it's not solving the problem. All right, and in some cases, it's having some other impacts outside of what we think that might be creating a bigger problem. Now, while that's an absolute necessity for us, we still have to evolve as to how we're going to do things. So our deputy chief came down and he said to Jay and I, listen, we do this, we need to evolve this, and the evolution came into how do we get a gang member out of a gang? That's what the first conversation was. So when we had that, we had to decide and talk amongst each other when we just been given this direction to say, hey, how do you get a gang member out of a gang? Go figure this out, guys. I'll ask you in this room, how do you do it? That's difficult. It's even difficult to think about. It's even difficult to even wrap your brain around it because initially, everybody wants this feel-good story, right? Like, okay, we're going to get them a job in trades, and you know, we're going to ban handguns, and we're going to create basketball courts, and we're going to create new sports programs, as if those haven't already been done, and as if that's the one component of this person's life that's lacking so much that results in them picking up a gun and pulling a trigger at the age of 15. It's naive and it's ignorant and it's almost disrespectful, as well as an oversimplification for how deep the issues lie. So with us, we said, all right, we're going to take a hard academic look at things. All right, let's go outside of our opinions and let's see what the research in the field is saying. What are the academics? What are the professionals? What are the professors and all the guys with the big brains? What are they saying over years of research? And we found a few things. But organizationally, we have to focus on 3 things. All right, the first thing being, well, okay, if we're going to go after a gang member, they're part of what? They're part of a gang. But let's really look at what does a gang do empirically. Like, what is the purpose of a gang? So I'll ask you here, if I were to say, what is the purpose? Not reasons why people join a gang. And that's where people get twisted, right? People say the purpose of a gang is to give belonging. No, that's not the purpose. That's a reason. somebody might join a gang. Or the purpose of a gang is to provide a home or to provide a family, to provide safety. No, that's reasons people might join a gang, but what's the purpose of a gang, objectively? I'll tell you what it is, empirically, all across the world. This is ultimately the core purpose of a gang. All right, it's three things. It's to deal drugs, it is to control territory, and it's to collect debt. Okay, that's the purpose. All across the world, they do that. Now, gangs, do they do more than just this? Yeah, what do they do? What do they do?
Violence.
Violence? What type of violence? Gun violence, including shooting. And what happens, what's the worst case scenario when you shoot somebody? They die, right? So murder. And what else happens now in schools with gang members? Sorry? Recruiting. Right, so they recruit other kids. They also commit robberies. They do thefts. They steal cars. They break into people's houses. They are involved in human trafficking at an abnormally high rate. They continue to victimize other people while they're being victimized. Right? They do all these different things, but all of those things that they do, those ancillary activities, the extra activities, are connected to one of these three. All right, so while this is the core all across the world, all these secondary activities, they're connected to something here. The shootings that occur between gang members, sometimes it could be for a variety of reasons. It could be related to one of these. It could be a bad drug deal. It could be people coming into their territory. It could be an outstanding debt. It could have been disrespect, but something is tied to one of these. So we knew, okay, listen, we're going to look at gangs. What are we looking at? Is it 5 kids playing basketball in a park? Yes or no? Is that gangs? No, it's not gangs. All right. Let's take a really gang impacted neighborhood. You guys give me a neighborhood. Right? Let's say a really gang impacted neighborhood. Right? Let's say what are some? Well, there's tons of them. Let's talk about a gang right here. So what is a gang? Like just no. What is like? Give me a gang name or a gang that you know of around you.
Oh my gosh, 5-point jump.
Based on your experience, does anybody else know about? Do you know any, or not know, but have you seen people youth? And give me a description of all those people that are. What is the majority of their skin color?
I was like, what are you getting?
That's exactly what I'm getting at, right? So, what is the majority of their skin color? So, okay, so we know there's a gang here. This is an example. We know that majority of their skin color is black, and are the majority of them male or female? Male, and what ages roughly? So young men. So knowing that stuff, and we know that they're here, is it fair to say that if we see 5 black kids playing basketball in a known gang area that they're gang members? That's not true. So we got to be real accurate in what we're looking at. So when we realized, okay, now we know kind of what we're looking at, we got to find actual activity at some sort to say, okay, this is kind of what it is. It's not kids playing basketball, it's not kids hanging out outside, it's not kids getting their hair cut. Those aren't gang members necessarily. There's a larger population here that looks like that has nothing to do with these guys. There's actually a way larger proportion of it, so we've got to be fair in how we do things. Well, the second part we had to look at was, well, okay, who are we looking at? And how do we find these gang members? So who joins gangs? So now it'll be around, now that we get down to reasons and maybe other purposes why people would join gangs. So I'll ask you here, again, you have some experience right over there. You guys have some experience with some gang members. I don't know over here. But if you do, by all means, your experiences are absolutely real to you, and you can stick with it and be true to it, because it's very important to talk openly and honestly here. Give me some of the background of some of the kids, potentially, in terms of behavior or perceptions, where you're seeing commonalities with kids who are gang members, maybe that go into adulthood and continue to be gang members.
In my experience, a lot of these often come from single-parent homes. Often don't have strong, caring, supportive adults, and have had really limited access to education, to extracurriculars.
Limited scope of opportunity.
Yeah, limited scope of opportunity.
Right, so that scope of opportunity is limited. You had mentioned that you said a low attachment to school and adult peers and mentors, I should say. Maybe, educational frustration for a variety of reasons. right? Maybe parent criminality, maybe family criminality, maybe access to guns and drugs within a neighborhood that's infested by gangs. Well, those are all the things we have to look at, and subjectively as a police officer who's been involved in guns, gangs, and drugs for multiple years, I've arrested hundreds of gang members, I've investigated thousands of gang crimes, I've interviewed and developed relationships, and have coached hundreds of gang members as well myself. And all that stuff, I could give you an accurate picture on my lens, but that's from a police officer's perspective. And our lens is 100% true to us, but it's not the complete lens. All right, the example we use is it's like a Rubik's Cube. All right, so our job in the Rubik's Cube, and when we're looking on one side as law enforcement, as police, all we really care about is this blue side. And as long as that side is blue, we're like, we solved the problem for us. But the other side is community housing. And the side underneath that is like the city of Toronto, and the side on top of that is the courts. The other side is schools, and the other side is hospitals, emergency rooms. We have all these impacted groups, and to each of us, we're all just putting our side of the puzzle together. In the process of us doing that, we're kind of screwing up the other side. And because none of us are really talking, we're not really handling the problem. We're kind of just pushing it off to other things. So we realized that very early on. And we said we have to develop a global picture of what are we looking at, like on a global picture. Let's really invest in understanding the needs of other agencies and what are the interactions and what are the impacts for them. Like the school, what happens in a school environment when there's gangs there? It's different. Their experience with gangs is not the same as ours. All right, their experience is they have gang members who are disruptive in the classroom, have low attachment to educational success, are the first ones at school but the last ones to leave and never attend any class. They're also intimidators, they also commit crimes in school. And with us, yeah, we get called in when they commit crimes, but everything else, that's no concern for us. And then when that kid is back in their neighborhood and they're playing or loitering in the lobby, well, that impacts the residents, right? And yourself, ma'am, how old are you? You're 15? I know, I'm just kidding. How old are you? 9 years old. Is this your mom? And mom, when you come home with her, do you ever feel intimidated? No, because you're tough, all right? But there's some moms who might feel intimidated. But how many other moms like you walk into the lobby sometimes and there's 10, 15 people hanging out? It's uncomfortable for them. I've responded to multiple police calls like that. I'm sure, Preston, you have as well, where moms are saying, listen, man, or dads are saying, listen, I can't even leave my building. They always give me a hard time when I come out. And then we got to show up and it becomes a whole thing, right? It's never fun for any of us. And the point of that was to determine, all right, how are we going to objectively look at this? And what you have here in those little laminated cards you have in front of you, those are gang risk factors. And what those gang risk factors are, they were produced from Public Safety Canada in 2007. And it was from academics and PhDs in the field of researching gangs. And what they had found was that all of these risk factors, the more of these you can check off for yourself or for somebody else, the more likely you are to become a gang member. All right, now, if you look at any of those surprise you? No, and does anything there have to do with your sex or your race or your ethnicity or the color of your skin or your background or your religion or what you believe in? None of it. None of it has to do with it. So we had an objective way to look at things and say, okay, we know what a gang is now. We know what gangs do. We kind of know now objectively what happens to people from the age of 0 all the way up to become a gang member. But then the third one was, where do we go? Right? So this is a map of the city of Toronto. Has anybody seen this map before? So what is this? You've seen it before?
Yeah, it outlines crime and...
Ultimately, it does in a weird way, but that's not exactly what this is. What this is produced from the city of Toronto and the Toronto Strong Neighbourhood Strategy. And a couple of years ago, I believe in 2016, the city of Toronto divided the entire city up into 140 neighborhoods. 140 neighborhoods. And when they divided them, they based them on an equitable score. And the equitable score said, all right, well, let's look at some things in all of these individual neighborhoods and see where everybody scores on equity. And equity in this case meant what is the access to economic opportunities? What is the access for communities here that have access to transportation lines that'll get them to bigger economic opportunities? What does the average household look like in terms of family dynamics as well as income? What does the community feel like their voice is in the development of their community? And they looked at all these things and they said, all right, we got 140 neighborhoods. The dark oranges and the yellows were the 31 lowest equitable neighborhoods. So 31 of the neighborhoods that in the city of Toronto are below an acceptable standard. What acceptable means, I don't know. I honestly do not know, but I know that there's 31 of these. So when we came across this and we said, oh, wait a minute, all right, we have 31 neighborhoods that were low equity. We did a separate crime map, and the crime map that we did was we looked at where we kind of know gangs live and where gangs commit violent crimes and where violent crimes are happening to other gang members and innocent people. And if we were to take that gang map and we take this low equity map, it almost matches up 100%, which is not a secret because one of these risk factors is social disorganization, which is a theory from the 1940s from social scientists that said, hey, sometimes your neighborhood and your community matters more than the individual when it comes down to committing crimes. So what are the chances, right? They're pretty high that the lowest equitable neighborhoods are the ones that are most impacted by gangs and gang violence. So once we determined, we said, all right, we know where to go. We kind of know what happens to make somebody a gang member. We know exactly what we're looking at for a gang. We had to then determine, what do we do? Like, what do we do now? And we had looked all over the world and we tried to find from another police service or social agency or somebody who had something that worked to get a gang member out of a gang. This was very early on, this 3 years ago. And when we looked all over the world, Canada, United States, South America, Australia, United Kingdom, nobody. There's not one place that has figured out a way to get a gang member out of a gang, but we came across a whole bunch of other stuff in the process of trying to find the answer where we realized, oh, there's no single answer. There is thousands of answers that all need to be deployed at the same time. You can't just come up with one solution. Like, we just had a federal election. So we had leaders of Canada talking about lots of things, but one of the things they talked about, I think for the first time, was gun and gang crime. Right? That was a legitimate question they got. What are you going to do about the gun and gang crime in the country? And does anybody remember some of their answers? Yes, ma'am.
All of their cracking down, bigger sentences, higher minimums,
Yeah.
which we know is actually not effective in decreasing gun violence.
No. So they're trying to take an American model. They're trying to they're trying to create a bigger deterrent, right? Saying, okay, if you commit these acts, well, we're going to increase your sentencing. That'll work for a very small portion of the population, like extremely small portion of the criminal population absolutely need to be incarcerated. Very small portion. But there's some other side issues to that where, I'll give you an example. In the United States, police officers get shot and killed every day. Right, I'll just paint this picture for you because this is just one impact that those type of things have that people don't really think about, all right? So police officers get shot and killed every day in the United States. So why is that? Does anybody know why? What happens if you... that kind of stuff, but I want you to think about this. You are a criminal in the United States. Okay, let's just forget about what happened for you to become a criminal. Let's just focus on this. You have a gun, whatever. You're going to get stopped by a police officer on the street, but this is now going to be your third felony offense. How long do you go away to jail for? Like for life, like 300 years. Like, it's not like here for life where it's like 6 years later out you go, right? You're gone for life. So you're in that hot seat and you see to yourself, okay, either I sit here and I get pulled over, this police officer arrests me and I'm done for life, or I take a risk here and I shoot him and I flee and nobody ever finds me. I just spend the rest of my life running. I'm not justifying it. I'm just saying that's a real thing. So when you have these single solutions, there's always a negative consequence at some point. There's always a diminishing return. So for us, it's focusing on, well, how do we minimize the diminishing return as well as apply as many solutions as you can? That solution, yeah, it'll work for a small percent, but those are the exceptions to the rule. And if you start making rules for the exceptions to the rules, it becomes ridiculous. Like, things start to go out of hand because now we're playing to such a small portion of the population, but you're going to punish everybody for it, right? And you lose everybody in it. So with us, we found an American model, and the American model, it's the gold standard model all over the world. It's called the comprehensive gang model. And if you go to our website, it's at torontogangprevention.ca. It's at the bottom of those cards, or it's even on the handouts we gave you. Everything I talk about with you today, we put all the publications that we cite on there, including this comprehensive gang model, which I highly recommend if you're in the space of figuring things out. Take a look at it. It's a fantastic read. And what it tells you there is, if you want to attack gangs, gang violence, I should say, not gangs, because about 50% of gang members are under the age 18. If you want to attack gangs, gang violence, I should say, sorry, you have to take a comprehensive approach, like a real wraparound approach. You have to get everybody on board who's impacted by gangs, and you have to create this massive hive mind and say, who is the best suited at what time to deal with this issue? All these risk factors here, when I talk to all the police officers that I know, and I talk to other police officers in other agencies, unless the person has an education on their own, I can't deal with any of this. This has nothing to do with law enforcement. Social delinquency, like high commitment to delinquent peers, it's not. I don't know what to do there. It's not a police officer. I don't know exactly. That's not my function in society. So to think that we have the answer to this, we don't. I don't know how to do it, but who does? Who would have some sort of impact on that? Community, maybe social workers, maybe child and youth workers, right? There's people who dedicate their life to this. This is what they want to do. They're like, listen, my job, my job in life, for example, school, poor school performance, teachers. I'm not a teacher. I don't know how to teach people professionally, but there's people who grew up and said, I want to be a teacher to increase school performance. So there's already people there that want to do it, that are better suited to do it. We just need to identify when it's happening and then empower those people and say, hey, this is your job. Like, you can do this. This is what you're for. Because everybody's always looking for an answer on the outside. Everybody wants somebody else to be the answer. We can't do that. So with these risk factors, we'll kind of go quickly through the life cycle of a kid, and I want you to tell me in this process of who would be the best to deal with this, or where can we implement some strategies to potentially fix this problem. So these risk factor categories, they don't all happen at the same time. The longer you go, the more of these accumulate. All right, so we have 5 categories. The first one is family. And family generally occurs between the age of 0 to 6. So if you look at the family risk factor categories here, there's about 8 of them there, 9 of them there, somewhere along the lines of that. And if you look at all that stuff, all right, so we got a kid, we got a family. Let's just use this example because it's a real example. A mother of 5, a single mother of 5. She lives in community housing, and her middle kid is the problem kid, like the absolute problem kid. That kid can't get attention or anything like that, so that kid is just like naughty as they get at home. I'm not talking like little naughty, like super naughty. So moms are struggling. She's got 5 kids. What are her obstacles that she has to deal with on a daily basis?
Like feeding her kids, working, if she's in school, there's like a million things that she has to deal with.
Yeah, so look, transportation, income, food, childcare, what else for that mom? Managing her kids,
judgment overall.
Judgment.
Yeah, perspective of what this one child will have, like what they take from that as her parenting, or
Yeah.
like yeah.
And let's say this mom, which is a real story we have, is 25 and she has 5 kids. This, and guess what? That's not a rarity in the city. All right, that 25, she's got 5 kids. Does she have a high-paying job? No. Why doesn't she have a high-paying job? She didn't finish high school potentially, or she might have finished, but has she got post-secondary education? What is her biggest limitation from getting something educationally to pursue? She had no time. She had no kids, or she has no time. And some people have said before and said she shouldn't have had that many kids. Listen, it's too late. It's already here. That's we can't talk about anymore. It's here. It's in front of you. We can say you shouldn't have all day. I shouldn't have had 4 Timbits. Preston should stop eating 30 Timbits every time we have these things. It's already happening. The point is, what do we do now? What do we do from here? Right? So with that mom there, she's already way behind the 8 ball. This is an uphill battle for the rest of her life. This is an absolute uphill battle. And what are the impacts on that middle kid who's a pain in the butt? Pretty heavy. Right now, is that something where you'd want to throw in a police officer? Is that something where you'd want to throw in a teacher necessarily? Is that something you'd want to throw in maybe some social work? Maybe.
I'm like thinking that I don't want to throw CAS in there because it doesn't sound like CAS is
No.
the answer.
And that's not what CAS is for.
Exactly.
Okay, that's not a child in need of protection. That's behavior.
He's a middle child.
He's a middle child, right? So maybe mom needs some help in some other ways. Maybe there's social services that can help with childcare. Maybe there are some online bursaries or grants that can help her get an online education in a way that's going to work for her. But how, does she have any access? Does she even think like that? Does she even know that this type of stuff exists? 1,000,000%. Right, so what is the solution there to really fix that? There's many other things, but we don't want to throw massive amounts of government at that. That's the last place where you want in my opinion, government to be is inside of your home. All right, really, the role of government is not to invade your space. The government is to provide support structures everywhere else, but not in your home, not to invade your space. We don't want to rely on that all the time, because at what point is there a diminishing return? What's a diminishing return of too much on the outside? I'll tell you, in my experience, after talking to thousands of community members, both both low income and high income, hundreds of social agencies, and 20 or 30 different law enforcement agencies, talking to all these people, my interpretation of too much in your house is it starts to diminish the value of family resiliency. Right? It's starting to diminish the value of, we got to overcome this as a whole, because then it becomes somebody else's problem, right? So we have that family risk factor category. We got all that there. We need to find the right people for it. That's not where you want police. That's not where you want CAS. That's not where you want schools. You want something to support that family structure to get the root cause. Why is that kid acting naughty? Is it because he can't get attention? Is it because mom's exhausted all the time? Is it because he's got other negative influences in the house? So we got that same kid, and all of a sudden becomes 6. And he goes to school now, right? And mom's not around. So who's the replacement for mom at the age of 6? Older sibling when mom's not at home, right? Picks him up from school, maybe brings him home. But when he's in school, who's the replacement for teacher? Or sorry, for mom. Gave me the answer. Teacher, right? And this kid who's naughty at home, is he naughty at school as well? Yeah, exact same kid. All right, because when he knows when I do naughty things, mom gives me what? Attention. And when he's naughty at school, who gives him attention then? Teachers come by. I love teachers. They're like my favorite people in the world. And they come and they'll bring this kid aside, and they pull him aside, and they say, listen, he needs educational assistance. We got to put him in this stream. And then this kid kind of gets isolated from everybody else again. All right, so that's at the age of 6. And the biggest indicator at the age of 6 is when you have a kid who's in kindergarten and they have school failure. Right, and I know people have said, listen, people don't fail. There's a big difference in succeeding and passing. This kid passes, he doesn't succeed. All right, they're just pushing him through because that's what they have to do. It's not the teacher's fault. It's not anything else's fault. It's just saying there might be some educational inconsistencies that are leading to bigger problems. Like I've dealt with, and I've coached. I was a high school officer for 2 years in the west end of the city, and there were grade 10 students that I was working with that didn't even know how to read. And I have no idea how you got to grade 10 and you don't even know how to read. And everybody just knows this kid doesn't know how to read. I'm not blaming anybody for it. I'm just saying, I still boggles my mind. It's been over 10 years since I've been in a school. And that was 10 years ago, which feels like yesterday, but it's a reality. All right, so this kid, he's 6, he's in a school. So he's in a school, he's got behavioral issues. Who's best suited there for the school risk factors? Like, let's take a look at them quickly. Like poor school performance, maybe some changes to teaching, maybe some changes to education, low educational aspirations. So let's talk about that, low educational aspirations. All right, what is, I was a high school graduate up until 2 years ago. And then I went back to college, and I flunked out of university for 2 years, became a cop. Went back to school because I value education. I value what those letters mean after your name. All right, they open up doors for you that otherwise wouldn't have opened up, regardless of how handsome and beautiful you are. All right, that's how it is. So I went back to school. I got a college diploma. Now I got it. I'm like super proud of it, super happy I did it in my 30s. But when you're that same kid and you grow up in an environment where mom has a high school education, doesn't matter, it's already done. Kid's not feeling good in school. And I was in school. Is that kid really thinking I'm going to get a master's or a PhD or I'm going to get a diploma? What is the perspective of education to that kid? Like realistically, you tell me. When you talk to a gang member and you say, hey, what are you doing after high school? Are they even thinking?
They say they're even thinking about after this, oftentimes.
They're not. They don't. Because, and we talk about low educational aspirations, seeds have to be planted to grow. And if the seeds, if you come from a tree and that's not a seed that's been planted there, it's not going to just magically implant itself at some point in your life. That has to be advocated and presented to you in a way that you're going to digest it accordingly. Right? It's like we have all these talks, and we talk to so many people, and I've interviewed so many gang members and talked all that stuff. And what I realize with a lot of these guys and girls, mainly guys, they are open to information. We talked about this briefly before. We said the game with them is you have to outlast. It's a conditioning game. You have to outlast and be consistent. Or you have to do that. And then you have to present the information in a way that they're going to value it. We can't just present it in a way that we value it. It's got to be presented in a way that they're going to value it. Right? It doesn't work that way. It says we want to think that younger generations think the exact same way we do. I don't think anything like my parents. All right, and the way they think about life, I'm like, you're crazy. Right? I go, you're nuts. And then my kids, I know at some state, my daughter says now, she's like, Dad, you're crazy. My daughter's your age. And she's like, Dad, you're crazy. I'm like, am I really? But I think I am. But that's the same thing with this kid is when we look at the risk factors, we got to be cognizant of who's best suited for here. People are too quick at this stage to call 911 or to call CAS or to call social workers and say, you got to deal with this kid. He's got a behavioral problem. What do you want me to do? Like legitimately, what do you want me to do here as a police officer? Or what do you want CAS to do? Nobody's going to scare that mom. In fact, you're going to make it substantially worse. In a couple of our town halls, CAS has been a big issue where mothers and parents who've had encounters with CAS have been like, I don't want people taking my kid away. Yeah, my kid might be a gang member, my kid might be violent, my kid have issues, but that's my kid. They're still fed, they're still taken care of, we're figuring stuff out, we don't want. Now CAS, that's not their role, but we had to have a educational session there, and thank God we did have CAS there, where CAS clearly articulated that their goal is never to remove a kid from a family. That's the last thing they want to do. But are there kids that need protection? Yep, 100%. There's kids that are not being fed every day. There's kids that are being abused. Their kids are being sexually assaulted. You can't just tell CAS, get out of here. Listen, they're going to do their job and their absolute necessity. But in this case here, I don't know the answers to it. It's a bit of a rhetorical question. But I don't think it's necessarily something where you want to pick up the phone and call 911 and say, send the firemen. It doesn't work that way, but sometimes that happens. And then what happens is we have to do something. Like if you call the police, we have to do something. And potentially when you have a kid in kindergarten and now they're having an interaction with a police officer and that might not go the way it is, well, what kind of stuff have we planted in that brain for the rest of this person's life? This kid's just being a kid.
And everyone else around you.
It's not good. And now look at that interaction, right? Let's say that kid gets pulled out of class, he gets brought to the principal's office, then the police are there, and his two friends are going to use the bathroom and they see him and they go back and they tell everybody, and then the other 29 kids in the class, what's the perspective towards this kid? It's horrible. It's not good. It sounds cool. It's not good for that one kid to be like, I didn't even do anything.
And the teachers too.
And the teachers as well.
That's where the pipeline is.
It does impact education, right? And yeah, I'm not saying this kid's perfect. I'm not saying we should boo-hoo everybody. What I'm saying is we have to start to evolve and change and really look at how can we do things a little bit better. But then the same kid, he becomes 9 years old, right? And that's your age, 9 years old. And do you get to go play outside by yourself? Sometimes? And where do you go when you play?
Like in front is in the backyard because I don't like to go out in public places when I'm alone.
Oh, very smart. Very responsible. So she said she likes to play in her backyard, not public places when you're by yourself. Right? And I know for me, when I was your age, I was allowed to play outside, but I had to come home when the streetlights came on. Right? And if I didn't come home, my dad would beat me up, which lucky you don't have that nowadays. But but we had to come in now. It's the city of Toronto, and there's many kids like you that play it on their own. But I want you to picture this kid. 3-year problem, 6-year problem, 9 years old, you're out on your own. Mom says you got too much energy. This kid's out on his own. When he's out on his own, does he find other kids like him or less like him? Just like him. Because now you found other kids that have been the same thing, and then mom says to them or dad says to them, you got too much energy, get out of here, dump your energy. And at the age of 9, we have a whole bunch of kids hanging out that are one of my favorite, blind in the blind, or one of my favorite ones I stole from somebody else was you have kids in the wild finding other kids in the wild. Right? And now you got this crew, this little rat pack of kids going out there doing whatever they want to do. And when you have like 9 or 10-year-olds or 11-year-olds and they go to school or they're on the street and they push somebody and they say names and they maybe take their cell phone or their lunch money or whatever like that. What do we call that at that age? Bullying, right? Do you know what's that called if you're over the age of 12? It's called robbery. So delinquency at the age of 9, it's the biggest indicator is you got to look at delinquent behaviors being criminal behaviors that kids are doing. They're starting to practice this. All right, it's coming to fruition. This is a feeling out process to say, oh, this is how it operates. But there's not this criminal mastermind in the inside of this kid's head saying, this is what we're going to do. We're going to.
This is my plan for my life.
It just happens. Right? It's like so organic, it just happens. But if it happens once, it doesn't get addressed. It happens again, it doesn't get addressed, and it becomes really impulsive. And then we start to steer into the areas of impulse control. So now this kid, he's 9 years old, and then from 9 to 15, you see the progression, or sorry, the life cycle, and all of a sudden he's 15, and at the age of 15, the biggest indicator is they're a self-admitted gang member. They don't hide it from you. They're not hiding here. If you go on social media, you go on their Instagram, their Twitter, their Facebook, their TikTok now, or Snapchat, or whatever stuff, they're telling you, like they're broadcasting it in these shiny letters, like this is who I am. All right, here's the name of my gang. Here are all my friends. This is what we do. If you listen to our song, we'll tell you all the things we did and we're planning on doing. There's no secret here. This is not a potentially. They're laying it out. And sometimes people say, well, no, that's just them being that. I don't know. All right, we know what it is. I've interviewed many, again, gang members, and we've debriefed many gang members, and they'll tell us at this age, I'm a gang member. We had one lift up his shirt and he was wearing the gang name. He's like, no, this is who I am. I'm very proud of it. They're part of something. Right now we're talking about not purpose but reason. So he's connected to it. He does his thing, tells us, yeah, I am a gang member. This is what I do. And when we asked him at the age of what happened with him, the story makes sense. And I'll give you a long story short. Mom gets him a bike at 8 years old. Bike gets stolen. Right, kid comes home, same thing, mother of 5. What is your response? Let's say you worked your butt off, you got your little one here, bicycle, and the first day she gets it, and she goes to the corner store and it's stolen. She comes home, and she says, "Mom, somebody stole my bike." Of course, I just you didn't have to say anything. It's just a scenario. You don't have to actually be mad at her, because I know my dad would be mad at me for a week just based on the scenario. It's like when you wake up and your spouse wakes you up and they're like, I had a dream you cheated on me last night, and they're mad at you for like a week. It was a dream. I don't know what to tell you. Well, what did she look like? That's my question, right? But in this case here, right, mom does exactly what you did. Mom loses her mind on this kid. They report it to police. We're not going to find the bicycle. I'll just tell you that right now. City of Toronto's too big. Unless we come across it by accident, or you come across it and you're like, hey, that guy's got my bike. Probably not going to find it. So we don't find that bike. High value to the family, low priority for us. They already have a weird relationship with the police. A year later, same thing happens. Report it, same thing. So now they got a double value with the police of, hey man, they can't even find a stolen bicycle. Why do I think they can do anything else? And then 11, 12, 13, kid goes missing multiple times. And each time he goes missing, it's like enhanced the behavior. It starts becoming real aggressive. And then 13, 14, 15, now you're seeing the violent offenses, right? You see the robberies, the thefts, the drug trafficking, the weapons offenses, and that's where we got them. Right? We'd spent 6 months, Jay and I, and we educated 2,000 frontline police officers on these risk factors. And we told these police officers, we said, hey, listen, man, if you come across a kid or somebody you know that fits this profile and you have a positive relationship, can you pitch the idea that we want to talk to him to figure out how to get him out of a gang? So we got turned into this kid because there was one police officer who said, I know exactly what to do here. So he arrested him and said, this kid is totally what you guys are looking for, called us. And that's how we got into working with this kid and his family. So we're talking with this kid at 15. He fits everything. He tells us his story. Well, unfortunately for us, he discontinued any conversation with us. He wants nothing to do with us. And that's kind of a common theme after a while. Right? So with that, we realized, okay, kind of lost this kid at 15 or 16. He wants nothing to do with us. We had some influence on him. He tells us, excuse me, he tells us how he gets recruited into a gang. And he got recruited at the age of 12, and the OG, which is an old-time gangster in the neighborhood, got him at 12, and he said, listen, because this kid's out playing by himself, right? All the time with all these other kids. And the OG, at the beginning, from what I remember, he tells him, we want you just to go steal iPhones, right? And they'll give him like a reward, like it was like a cheeseburger, maybe $20. So these kids start stealing iPhones, and then it progresses into, we want you to find girls and do robberies and take their phones in their neighborhood. So they're doing it, and then they started to get rewarded. They started to be included in YouTube videos. They started to be included in, Here's clothing for you. Here's merchandise. So this kid's 12 when he gets recruited. How old is the guy who recruited him? 30, 40, what else? 20? He was 16. So we have in the city of Toronto kids recruiting kids, right? And then when we had identified who the OG was, so the OG was 16 when this kid was 12. We were talking to this kid when he was now 15 and the OG is now 19 and he's a suspect in a murder, right? So it's all like legitimate. The whole research behind all this thing is bang on. This is not even up for debate in our experience. This story here is 1,000,000,000% what's happening everywhere, not just here in Toronto, everywhere, in every major city. It's an epidemic. So with this kid, self-admitted gang member at 15, well, in the community risk factor category, this is kind of the stage we're at now, where this is the age of 18. Where in the age of 18, the biggest indicator is serious violent crime in a community, right? Which again, we're looking at this in depth. We're not looking at this in width. And when you look at things in depth, it starts to get a lot more clear. And what we're seeing is what are the implications to many different things when it happens at the community level. And at this stage here, what we're seeing is shootings happening in places where they don't regularly happen. Absolutely innocent people being shot and killed. We see crimes on the rise. We see shootings on the rise. We see a gang presence on the rise. And the newspapers say it, the prime ministers or the federal leaders talk about it, all the politicians are talking about it, the city's talking about how do we change things, the police are talking about it, and everybody says somebody has to do something about this. And who's that somebody? It's the police. It's 911. Guess what? That's what we're here for. We're 100% here for that. That's what we want to do is we want to go out and arrest the violent people and investigate these crimes and do justice for the victims of these crimes. But our mission and our goal in this particular initiative and strategy is for it never even to get to this stage. All right, so with us, we stay very cognizant of what our focus is, which is saying that, yeah, the police, we're here for this. This is what we do. This is our role in society. Our role in society, unfortunately, is to arrest people and to investigate crimes and to find that 16-year-old recruiting that 12-year-old who, at the age of now 19, is a homicide suspect. That's our role in society. And we need to master that role before we start to span out in areas that we're not best suited for. We don't have the educational background in particular to deal with this, but we're still in those spaces. Maybe we shouldn't be in those spaces. Maybe there's somebody else that should be in that space. Maybe we should revert back to what we're supposed to do. And maybe we should encourage partnerships to have other people come in places that we recognize things. But there's other deeper issues when you talk about community and gangs. And these are some of the insights that we're getting back from the communities that we work with and from these town halls. And actually, I'll get to that before we get to that portion. I'll just fly by this. So these are the risk factor categories, right? We talked about, and these are kind of the order that they happen. Family, school, peer group, individual, community. So 3, 6, 9, 15, 18. 18 plus, right? That's the way it goes. Now, as you go across all of these, there's risk factors, risk factors, risk factors, risk factors, but these grow exponentially. So a kid, 0 to 7, and this is not some hocus pocus, but when we're 0 to 7, our brains operate on a theta wave, which is a state of hypnosis. And what we're doing is we're collecting data for how to learn how to survive, not to succeed in life. All right, so really easily influenced. And I want you to think to your own flaws in your own character, and what are the things you don't like about yourself that before bed you think about and you're like, oh, I wish I didn't do that today. And think back to 0 to 7 for yourself and just think, is there a connection there? What happened for me 0 to 7 to develop the type of person that I am today? The parts that I don't like, maybe the parts that I do like. Right, 0 to 7. Keeping that in mind, if we look at the family risk factor categories, right, we look at that one kid, he starts at 3, poor behavior at home, but then he went all the way up to 15 where he's doing robberies and weapons offenses and most likely, and I hope it never happens, but I don't think he's going to see 18 the way things are going for him. Now, if we were to intervene right here, all right, 15 where we had him, we had no success and we tried everything, we had 0 success. If we had got this guy right here, what are the chances we'd have much better chances with this guy? Right or wrong? Agree or disagree? Yeah, this guy's... I'm referring to everybody.
Yeah, okay.
Because for us, this is the whole point of us getting collected, right? So the point of this is to collect and paint a picture for something bigger. And what that bigger thing is, we found an American model, United States, it's called the comprehensive gang model. And that model that I explained to you before says you got to incorporate everybody, right? So this same family at the age of 3, let's say mom is losing her mind, she calls police, which happens sometimes, says, I don't even know what to do with my kid. I don't know who else to call, he's a terror, and we show up. Well, the fact that we've educated our frontline officers, we can say, hey, listen, this is our job. But once we're there, who do we call? Are there resources within vicinity of this family that are better suited for this, where we can start to mitigate these risk factors with protective factors? Are they free? Are they accessible? Are they going to work with this family? And guess what, man? There's thousands of them in the city. There's you can pick up. It could be a phone call. It could be an email. It could be a text message. But we need to get a collected group of agencies and stakeholders together as like a hive mind. Right, saying that we're all thinking for the same end goal, we're all focused on the same solution, not the problem. We just need to focus on the solution. We need to be able to recognize. So the whole point of this is like a massive education campaign. So for us, on our strategy, as much as it is focusing on trying to learn and how to motivate gang members to not do that lifestyle anymore, it's also advocating what we learned. So we have 4 pillars that we really work under. First one is education. It's trying to stay up to date with what's actually happening in the academic lens. Like what are the experts saying in the field outside of our experience? And where can we corroborate the two? And then how can we have a platform to educate as many people as we can? And the second part to education is doing things like this, where we're trying to engage and consult with communities to hear back and to say, you know what, this is what's happening in this neighborhood. We are in 50 neighborhoods, and I'll tell you, no 2 neighborhoods have been the same, right? But you'll see strategies just paintbrushed across the entire city as if they're gonna work. Right, Jane and Shepherd, even though it's down the street from Jane and Finch, is different. It's not the same place, right? And then Jane and Finch, if you just go over to Kipling and Finch, that's a different place. And then you go down to Albion and Albion, that's a different place. And then you go to Galloway, that's a different place.
Yeah, Jane and Finch, even though it's Jane and Finch, you go to like Top Driftwood, Bottom
Yep,
Driftwood,
yep.
they're-
It's a different place. Top Driftwood is like old Italian families. Bottom Driftwood is like the Driftwood that everybody talks about, right? So you have all these families just southeast of Jane and Finch that are like just they're just old Italian people mowing their lawn, and they get that, they get that impact of the gangs. Sorry, excuse me. But the point of that is we can't apply paintbrush things to the entire city. We got to know what's happening in individual communities to find out, hey man, where do you need these things plugged, or how can we figure this out collectively as a whole? Who are the community champions? Who are the advocates here? A big part of this for us too is identify people in the community. Jay and I can waste 90% of our time just building trust. It's a waste of our time. We don't have the time for that. I don't have the time. The reason we don't have the time is because as we're trying to build trust, there's people getting shot and killed. Why would we try to build trust and go out of our way as our primary focus when there's already people like you in the community that already have that trust? Why wouldn't we leverage your trust and build you up as best as possible and empower you in ways that we're like, okay, what do you need? If you're the community leader, what do you need? And how can we facilitate that? How can we connect you to places to support you and build you back up? So education is our first pillar. Our second pillar is prevention. All right, and prevention is absolutely important, but academically and empirically stated, if we waited till it's 15 to 18 to get into the prevention space, we've waited too late. The likelihood of success is 0 to none. But between the ages of 0 and 9, prevention measures all over the world, empirically proven, have been, these are the places where you want to put it. Okay, these are the places where we want to put. This is where you're going to get the biggest bang for your buck. If you want to focus on prevention, we got to get 0 to 9. Reason being is they're easily influential. They're in a place of support. They have a ton of adults around them being school staff and their peer group. If everybody's getting the same wraparound care, the likelihood of them playing with other kids who get what they get is higher. So we got to invest in the prevention efforts very early on, 0 to 9, with both families as well as kids. Second to that, and this doesn't get enough attention, is intervention. All right, so we have education, we have prevention, and then our third thing is intervention. And the intervention piece is, if you're a gang member, you're almost 70% more likely to reoffend than a non-gang member. So we have gang crimes, right? And sometimes you'll hear it, and even our chief of police, and even for us, we get so frustrated when we have arrested somebody repeatedly for firearm offenses, and they're out on bail and they're out on bail, and that's a topic of conversation that we're having now to determine what is that going to look like going forward, where, you know, how many times are we going to arrest the same person with a gun in the course of 2 or 3 years, right? But here's the thing with that. We're still arresting them all the time, but that guy is one of, or girl is one of tens of thousands of people between the ages of 12 and 18, or 21, we'll say, that are just constantly cycling through the criminal justice system. And while all the focus is on prevention, what about all these tens of thousands of people stuck right in this pocket? Like we spoke about it, and we've done a gap analysis. If you are a male over the age of 18 and you're getting out of jail, there's nothing for you. Like you're completely on your own almost, right? Luckily for us, you guys have, right? You guys have a fantastic organization. Which do you want to explain to us exactly what you guys do?
Sure. So we look for avenues. There's a few components to our organization. So one is the education department, where we work with youth in remand custody and creating access to education either through GED or independent learning, college, university, while they're in remand custody. The project that I work for, though, is called Project Prosper, and I work with youth with firearms charges or firearms related charges, and I work directly with them while they're inside on like personal development, but also coordinating systems that are outside, so that while they're inside and transitioning to getting outside, the referrals are much warmer, so there's just more support as they find their way back outside. But I stay with them until they don't need me anymore.
Yeah, so that's a great wraparound. That's a in and out care.
Case management. Yeah.
Case management. Is it tiring? It's exhausting.
It is, and then at the same time, it's like, it's so, like, I don't want to say fulfilling because that sounds silly, but it's like, I'm so grateful to get to be a part of their world because this is where they've been forgotten.
It's impactful.
Yeah.
Right? Impactful is the one of my favorite words is impact, and that's totally what it is. So the intervention end, you know, who would be the best there for the intervention? Right? And there's many organizations and agencies. Listen, police, we're the beginning of that intervention. All right, we are the entry point into both the criminal justice system, as well as the re-entry into the criminal justice system, as well as the prosecution. So we're at a critical point where we have a lot of influence. If we have that influence and we can make use of that 1 hour of massive motivation, but we know of organizations like yourself, and we can start pitching these organizations to say, hey man, you know, this is, you got a second chance here. You got other options here. You don't have to do this. We can figure something out. And we have organizations that are in alignment and say, yeah, no, listen, the focus here is a solution. We're good. The real issue with integrating that many issues is competing egos. Or that's the number one criticism of the model we're trying to implement is it's never been successfully implemented anywhere because of competing egos, right? And we see that all the time. And the idea is it's not just everybody else, it could be the police as well. But in our conversations over the last 3 years, we've been trying to merge in a true integrated fashion, like horizontal services across the city, as well as vertically different levels of government. So our municipal, our provincial, and our federal government. So we can all align at a cross point here to say, all right, this is a major issue that we're all being impacted by. We're operating in individual silos, potentially making it worse for each other. Why don't we get together, formalize this, close those gaps, shrink it down. Let's take the best things that work and let's invest in the best things that work. Not the things that might work, the things that actually work. Things that have been evaluated and we're not going to happen. Well, the problem you have there is ego. For example, there are some organizations that we might refer to. Let's just use an example here. We get that kid, we motivate him, or 18-year-old will say, we rearrest him for the third gun offense. And we say, listen, man, 3 times. The next time when we come and meet you, you might be a dead body. Or we might be handcuffing you because of it. You killed somebody. You don't got to go down this route. We got to push you somewhere. And if we just push them to an organization that we haven't vetted, that we don't know what they do, that are sometimes a pop-up organization that lies about what they do, which there are lots of, unfortunately, in the city of Toronto, well, we might have done more of a disservice. And if we send them there and that organization says, you know what, you can't trust the police, you can't trust CES, you can't trust your social workers, we're the only ones you can trust because we understand you, we're now creating a huge problem. So the idea is, even for us, we have to get in alignment with organizations that we all agree with each other. We can all understand there's a bit of a narrative here, there's a bigger picture as opposed to who's more influential, who's more important. That doesn't matter here, it's who's the best suited for this problem. So the intervention strategy for us is including, obviously, the police, the jails, the court systems, the Ministry of Attorney General, anybody and everybody that's impacted by criminals once they get incarcerated and once they're put in the system. We got them in a confined space with some structure. We got some good things happening there for people who lack structure in their life. Some people thrive under those environments. It's taking advantage of those opportunities to thrive and really growing them there. And then the last part, and again, this is all evidence-based, right? So prevention empirically works 0 to 9. Intervention works, I believe it's 9 to 18 plus. Empirically, that's where if you're going to do intervention strategies, they work the best at that stage. Well, once it's 12 plus and it's serious violent crime, you know what the number one way to combat gang violence is? The number one way to shut it down? It's you arrest them. You have to arrest them. You have to control those that are killing people and shooting people and all the other stuff. Right? It has to be done. That's the number one way all over the world, which is whose job is that? That's the police. That's our job, right? Oh, thank you so much. Thanks. That's our job, is to go out and arrest people, and that's our role. But here's the part now where we're looking at organizational change even for us. All right, and this is where it gets down to. With arresting people, I'll give you a quick stat, and where we got it from is there was a study done of a gang in Los Angeles, 300 gang members. And when they looked at the gang, they realized that only 10% of the gang, or 30 members of this 300 gang, were responsible for everyday criminal decision making. Only 10% of these 300 gang members were the actual criminals. The other 270 in and out within 2 years. And that was just a rotating structure. In and out within 2 years. So you had 270 that are a bit fluid, that come in when it's opportune, come in at the right time, come in because they live in the neighborhood, and then they leave. And they leave for a variety of reasons. They leave because they found a girlfriend or boyfriend, they were a victim of a crime, they saw a crime and said, this isn't for me. They moved, they had family pressure, a whole bunch of things. And when they all left for those reasons, none of them faced any violent repercussions. In fact, the 10% was happy that they were leaving. Majority of the 10%. Said, you got something else in your life, you go crazy, you go nuts. But that remaining 10% is that 10% that does the drive-by shootings where they kill people, that does the random shootings, that does the drug trafficking where people are dying of drug overdoses from laced drugs. They're the ones doing the human trafficking, the gang recruitment, the international trade, the murders. That's that 10%. So with us on the suppression end, and this is where organizational comes in, is with law enforcement and police officers, if we can determine, based off of the risk factors and behaviors and interviews, that the person we're dealing with is part of that 90%, maybe we should start looking at ulterior options as opposed to incarcerating that person or putting them through the criminal justice system. If we can articulate and identify that, okay, there's the likelihood this person here is not part of that 10%. And really incarcerating them might make this worse potentially at this point here. Right? The example that I give to police officers whenever we talk about this is we arrest sometimes. I'll use a night school example. Night school, 3 guys rob 1 guy, take his cell phone. All right, and the person who got robbed knows who robbed them. The person who got robbed is just a complete innocent kid, and he tells the principal, I just got robbed by like Jim, John, and Jeff. And the principal says, man, they robbed you, what did they take? They took my white iPhone. So right away the principal calls police 911. Hey, listen, this kid got robbed, Jim, John, and Jeff, he knows them. They were last seen walking towards the pizza. It's night school, they're still there, it happened 5 minutes ago. Then we go down. We go to the pizza, and who do we see? Jeff, John, and Jim. And we arrest them when we find the cell phone. We got it, right? Victim knows who they are, principal knows who they are. We see them, we catch them with the phone. This is a case closed. But when we bring them back to the police station, Jim and John are crying. All right, they're like, man, they don't have any police history. They've never been arrested before. They're crying. They say they don't even know what happened. But then the other guy, Jeff, he's just stone cold sober. He's not saying anything. He's got a lengthy criminal record. He doesn't care. Now, in that case, there are 3 of them that did the robbery. All 3 participated in the robbery. Would it really be suitable for the 2 crying to almost just paint him with that brush, potentially? And just say, listen, man, you're going to eat it too at this point? Or can we start looking at different options? All right, but then there's negatives to that as well, potentially, which are, what about the victim of that crime? All right, and here's the balancing act. This is a difficult seat to sit in because it's a balancing act. You're a professional fence sitter. You have to be a professional fence sitter at this lens, because if you tie into the emotions of that kid from 0 to 18 that we talked about, which is absolutely emotional, it's actually tragic and heartbreaking. Well, we're not seeing the other end of it. And the other end is, who's on that path of destruction? Look, who is there? There was a pregnant lady shot and killed in a drive-by shooting in Jamestown 3 years ago. Should the person who did that be held responsible for what they did? Killed not only the pregnant lady, but also the baby. I'll ask you here, should the person be held responsible?
And then we know that if something happened, he's also a victim.
It is what it is.
Yeah.
It is what it is. But we have laws in place for a reason. We have rules in place for a reason. We should all be able to go anywhere we want and not feel scared to go there, especially in your own neighborhood. There's a family we're working with, and I went to this family's house, working with their kid, their one kid, and they had a 6 and a 5-year-old peering out the window in their family room, looking in the backyard. And the parent of this kid that I was dealing with says, "No, man, I can't let my kids play outside because there's so many shootings happening in the neighborhood, so many murders. You know, they're prisoners in their own household from these gangs committing violent acts. And while these gangs are a percent of the population, they're enough that they're holding neighborhoods hostage. And yeah, we feel sorry for these guys and girls that are potentially doing this, but you can't escape this. It's got to stop. And the police, we need to do our job. And this is not saying anybody support us. You don't have to. We're okay with that. We're not here to garner support. I mean, nobody here calls the police when they have extra chicken at home or cake or juice boxes, right? Nobody. Nobody says, "Oh my God, there's extra candy from Halloween, call 911, send the cops." When do they call us? For bad things, horrible things. So there's already a negative connotation. I'm good with that. I'm sure all my partners are good with that too. I never signed up on this job to be praised, right? And it hasn't happened, so my fingers aren't crossed. The point is, there's a role for everything. There's an absolute role for everything, but we have to sit on this fence, be completely objective of what we're looking at, and determine what is the best case here, and let's take a chance on something and move with it. Because everything we're doing now, it's not potentially working. So we got to roll the dice some points and say, let's just try this and see what happens. With us, even though we have those 4 pillars of education, prevention, intervention, suppression, those 4 pillars kind of sit on a bed of sand. And that bed of sand is made up of these 5 things. It's communities. Mobilization is getting into these individual communities, finding the champions, and really hearing back what's happening. One of the insights we got from one of the town halls was one community member had said, we are not underserviced, we're poorly serviced. What's your thoughts on that?
I know often with the youth that I work with, that consistent caring adult often doesn't come from service providers where it should come from.
Yes.
So like just bad services.
Yep.
You know, they are a community, but they just are not actually doing what they are supposed to do.
That's a problem. Right, when you have a service in a neighborhood, Jane Finch, for example, has more social services than any other neighborhood in Canada. Yet it's one of the most violently impacted areas. Where's the problem? That should be looked at a little bit harder. And we're looking at it to determine what is happening here. When you have programs geared towards kids, high school kids, that operate Monday to Friday, 9 a.m. to 3 p.m., we got a massive problem here. What are you doing? What space are you taking up? What funds are being dumped your way that could be dumped in another way? We have programs for senior citizens that are so heavy for that in neighborhoods that don't have a senior citizen population. Right? What they need is other things. So it's really taking into account what's happening in the community and where can we empower people and develop the right things to drop into there. Opportunities provisions for the gang kids you dealt with. Are they dumb? Are they stupid? Not at all, right? They're intelligent. They're actually very charismatic. They're very intelligent. They're very influential as well as easily influenced. Emotionally high EQ, or maybe a little too high at some point, which makes them volatile.
Exactly.
But if they're not attaching traditional streams of education, is it realistic to say, for this exception of the rule, that we shouldn't maybe make something different? Or maybe create some different blueprints? Maybe create some different outlets to take what their natural gifts are and strengths and introduce some mentors, some coaches into maybe traditional fields outside of the traditional, after high school, you got to go to college, university to be successful. like realistically, it's absolutely important. I value education so much, but that's me. That might not be true for everybody else. Are there multi-billionaires and millionaires who never went to university or college? Entrepreneurship, do they not have that drive and that passion, that self-belief? We got to look at different opportunities to create that trajectory in their life that might have not been otherwise understood. That might be at least a little bit outside of traditional norms when we look at education and post-secondary education. Social intervention that's a deep issue that we can go on forever. Suppression is exactly what I told you about. The police there's individual officers who are amazing at what they do. Well, they run these programs and they're great people. They'll run, basketball camps and bikes and pro cops, computers, and all that stuff. Those are absolutely amazing to have, but that's up to an individual officer. People like people, they don't like organizations. All right, like I go to there's a McDonald's by my house, and I like 2 ladies that work there. I like 2. I only go for them. Everybody else, I don't want. I know what shifts they work. I do. I know what days to go because I know what shifts they're working. And when I come in, I don't even have to talk to them. They know exactly what I want. They're just like, oh, same thing? Yep. And they got it ready to go, and we catch up on things, and then I'm at the door. Well, it's the same thing. I don't like McDonald's. I like those 2 people. McDonald's is not myself. It's these 2 people. With us, with police officers, it's important to engage in that space to engaging, but again, number one way to combat gang violence, you want to stop these shootings, we got to be in these areas, and we got to know what's up. We have to do our job. And can we do it better? We could always do it better. And that the point of this is to learn how we can do it better, not to make the problems worse. And then organizational change and development, that's not just for the Toronto Police, that's for everybody we work with, right? It's for community housing, Ministry of Attorney General, City of Toronto. I mean, everybody can improve on how they operate. The idea is to champion these different changes. And where we really champion these changes are from conversations with communities where we start to insight or gain some insights. These are the people in the American model that they say you got to get in touch with, all right? They said, hey, listen, these are the agencies you have to incorporate into this. And the police, generally, we lead this in terms of getting this started because we have the most access to gangs and gang members. Right? We see them all the time. We arrest them we have the intelligence, we have information sharing protocols, but it's our job to bring everybody in. Well, over the last 3 years, these are just some, and it's expanded since, of the organizations that we've been really pitching this to. Right, to say, hey man, you got to get in. Us, the City of Toronto, Ministry of Attorney General, which is like the provincial body of prosecution services, so all the gang members that get in the court system, they get prosecuted by MAG, we call it, Children and Youth Services, Community Safety and Correctional Services, both the school board, Safe and Caring Schools, CAMH. What's the mental trauma in gang kids and their families? It's like up here, they're redlining all the time. And not just the kids, but also their parents. Victim witness protection for victims of gang crime, faith-based organizations, religious groups. Like, is anybody here really tied to their faith? You are? And is there like a religious leader there? Is there somebody who runs it? It's finding those people. It's finding those people to bring them in to say, hey, there's a place for faith in this. All right, it's a blueprint in life for a lot of people. And we're open to that, as well as religious institutions, employment programs, businesses, hospitals, and then the media. Right, the media has got to be something that gets brought into this, and I'll tell you why. Where we bring in the media is, and this is a part of organizational change and development, is we were in one neighborhood, and there was this kid that was murdered there, 15-year-old kid. Was murdered in this neighborhood. And when we got there and we talked to this community and we talked about this 15-year-old kid that was murdered, the community as a whole in that room, and there's probably about 50 or 60 people there, they knew this kid. Right? They all knew this kid. They knew him from the age of 0 up. And so they knew him as a 0-year-old all the way up to a 15-year-old, and he was shot and killed a year earlier. And when they were talking to them, the insights we gathered from that was somebody in that room had said, listen, when the chief of police was interviewed about this murder, the number one question the media asked is this gang related? And the chief said, yes, it is gang related. And while it was absolutely gang related, that community did not know him as a gang member. All right, so what they felt was that death was devalued. Like absolutely devalued as to who the individual was. It had nothing to do with him, it's just the fact that they said is a gang member that killed another gang member, So the majority of the city just does this, right? They go, okay, it's not my neighborhood. All right, but and the craziest part about that whole thing is really, if you look at the city right now, this problem has always been here. Right? This is not a pop-up problem. Gangs, gang violence, they were just kept into certain pockets. Right? Certain pockets of the city are known as gang areas. So it was cool when it was there, but now that it's everywhere, it's a problem. Right? So when we talk about, how people talk about things, what does the word gang actually mean? When should it be used? When shouldn't it be used? It's not really about social justice or anything like that. It's about being real as a human being. Because for us, when we have that murder and that homicide, that 15-year-old kid, which is yet to be solved, part of that is police officers, we victimize ourselves when we go in and we knock on doors looking for answers. We knock on doors of these people and we say, hey man, did you see what happened? Did you see what happened? And community members say, nope, 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 nope. Well, somebody in that community knows what happened. A lot of people. And that goes to a level of distrust. And this is where the insights come back from the community. In that same conversation, what we learned in that conversation was somebody in that room knew who murdered the kid. Right? There's 50, 60 people there. Without a doubt, somebody knew. They actually brought it up. Somebody actually brought it up and said, somebody in this room knows who killed that kid. And everybody in the room kind of agreed without agreeing, right? They nodded their head, And I want you to picture the parent of that kid in that neighborhood, and you wake up and your neighbors know who killed your kid. The person at the store knows who killed your kid. The person at the subway knows who killed your kid, but nobody's even told you. So for us, what that did for us is it reframed what trust actually means. And for us as police officers, traditionally speaking, when we knock on those doors and we think that 100% of their distrust is towards us, it's not true. We're about 10% of their distrust. That distrust starts in every interaction from the moment that they wake up, especially when they're a victim of a crime. So with us, if the organizational change of that aspect is when we talk to police officers, we say, hey, when you're knocking on that door, and they shut that door and they say no, understand you're only 10% of that. Now, if I were to ask you to go make a relationship with somebody, and I said to you 100% of their hate is directed at you, how motivated would you be to re-knock on that door? Probably zero, right? Listen, we're not perfect. We do the same thing. But if I said, hey, listen, you're only about 10% of that hate, and they shut that door the first time, there's a much better chance I'm going to knock on that door and acknowledge that, hey, listen, I understand there's other stuff happening. I'm not stupid to that, but I'd love to be able to talk to you and hear what's happening. And you can work some stuff out like that. So it's those type of insights that we really take back, that really help promote some organizational change for us, as well as help us be better at what we do as police officers. How do we better identify that 10%? How do we better penetrate these communities to find out who's holding you hostage? Like who is holding you hostage here? And how can we do it in a way that we're going to protect everybody in the process? I'm not saying we have an answer right now. What I'm saying is we have an answer. It's just going to take time to do. But these are the baby steps we all need to do together to figure out what is the long-term solution. We get asked all the time, and they say, what is the program? There is no program. There's a structure. There's a framework. We're building the frame, but we need to fill the inside of it up. And we can't do that by ourselves. So that being said, I'll turn off the camera. I'll turn off the mic. That is our website. If you go on there, there's tons of resources. I will tell you this. The way we're trying to gear this is you don't need us for this. Okay, you absolutely do not need us for this. If you go on our website, we don't track anything. We don't track IP addresses. So it's independent of the police. It's hosted by GoDaddy and Wix. It's completely on its own. When it's on its own, I made the website. That's why I know we don't track anything. It's all on there. And we have if you go to one portion of it, it says, hey, need help. It's a little pop-up box. You click need help. There's a 60-second video. And what it does, it tells you, hey, these are the risk factors. We have 3 links on our website. One is to the Toronto Police Service. We have with Ryerson University, we developed an asset portal. One is Ontario 211, and the other one is Wellbeing City of Toronto. You can click any of those links, and it's like a map that pops up. And in that map, in the search box, you punch in your postal code. And when you punch in your postal code, it'll bring up all the social services in your area. And you just click the box, and it'll tell you everything about the social service if you click the little icon. So you pop in your postal code, you pop it in. If you know the risk factors, you can find social services close to you that might fill those risk factors, and you can do it without us. You can do it without nobody ever knowing. So our goal is to educate enough of the public population to say, hey, these are the tools, this is how you use it. You don't need to tell anybody. If you want to keep it private in your house, you can do it. With us, we do work with some gang members. There's a few I'm working with right now. I don't even know their name. It's all through social media. So it's all through Instagram and Twitter. We just shoot messages back and forth. A lot of it is just coaching. Hey, how do we change what you did today? How do we fix what you did yesterday? What are the real issues going on? It's difficult to manage, but it's totally doable. If you are on Instagram and Twitter, my handle is simple. I'm at Toronto Cop. Just Toronto Cop. If you see it on there, you can add me. You can see the stuff. Go to the website. We have all the resources there. So thank you guys for hanging in there. I'm going to shut this stuff down, and then we can just have open conversation. Any questions you want to answer, we'll answer it as best as we can. We hope everybody in the room is respectful of each other, can respect everybody's opinions, and then we'll go from there. Is that cool? Okay, perfect, awesome. Grab some more stuff if you want. We'll take 2 minutes, and we'll, I need to just get some water for myself.